Hi there, it's Todd. Thanks for coming to my session that is called FileMaker as a Headless CMS. A little bit about me as we jump in. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Proofgeist. I've been doing FileMaker since the early 90s and JavaScript since 08, 09 to 10, somewhere in that range. And I live in Southern California. First, let me just acknowledge that building or FileMaker as a headless CMS is a really bad title. Headless CMS is a product category that I feel that FileMaker can fit right into, and I was trying to sort of use some of that marketing buzz around that category as a way to kind of frame this session. But as I wrote it, that just really didn't seem to carry a lot of water because it doesn't really talk about what the problem is we're trying to solve with the techniques that I'm going to talk about today. So this is the title that I'm going to propose, the retitling of this session: Build Websites with FileMaker that Scale. It's got a subtitle, which is Jam Club, and you'll see why that is as we get into it. Because that's really the problem we're solving is we're building lots of websites these days. We'd like to make public-facing sites. But the challenge with sort of traditional ways of approaching that with FileMaker is that you can't serve a lot of traffic because the FileMaker server isn't going to be able to handle hundreds or thousands of users connecting to that FileMaker database using the data API or OData or things like that. If they're hitting it often and hard, so things like blogs and marketing websites, e-commerce sites, those kinds of things just really haven't been feasible to do with FileMaker, or at least if you're thinking about it sort of from a traditional perspective, they haven't been feasible. But if you think about it from this perspective, cloud first, they actually are quite feasible. So most of what was hard about scaling, or most of the problems that FileMaker has with scaling to a large numbers of users, requesting data from the database, images, image optimization, those kinds of things, so that you can make a nice UI. Those kinds of things have been moved out to the infrastructure, and they're available in a wide variety of services and frameworks and infrastructure. And this is really due to the magic of the cloud, which is where it's like this virtual world where all these services exist and you can integrate them. And FileMaker has the core set of capabilities that you need to plug into this cloud infrastructure. You can run in the cloud as platforms like Claris Cloud or our automatic cloud service for FileMaker. It runs just fine there. It also has data APIs and other capabilities for getting data in and out. So it actually integrates quite well with the sort of cloud first ethos. And when it does, you get some capabilities. You get resiliency, availability, scale, and speed. In particular, these are the ones I'm focusing on when you're building a website. Because obviously, if your FileMaker database is down, you really don't want your website to be down. And so, if your FileMaker database is going down for a large period of time, that's a problem. But it's often necessary to take it down for a short period of time, a few minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maintenance, things like that, and doing data migrations. And you wouldn't want your website to be offline at that point if you can avoid it. And if you start from the cloud and think about what the cloud can provide you, you can work around all of those things. And that's what we're going to get into here. So our journey begins with an agenda. So we're going to talk about some demos, concepts, and problems and solutions. And I want to dive into that first journey by saying, what is the first rule of Jam Club? And it's not, don't talk about Jam Club. We're going to talk a lot about Jam Club. But the first rule of Jam Club is don't hit the database unless you have to. So let's take a look at a FileMaker file and the website that it provides the data for. All right, here is our demo site. It's called Jam Club. And if Jam is your jam, then Jam Club is for you. And so this is a website where you can learn about Jam and you can buy a subscription to the Jam of the Month Club, where you get jams delivered to your door every month at different scales depending on your love of Jam. Do note that if you go at the jam at scale rate, you might need to make some trips to the ER. So we'll give you some discount rates for that as well. So this is a content-heavy site, right? We're actually not going to get into the e-commerce part of this in this session, but I want to talk about the blog session in particular. Now, so this is all running in the cloud, and all of the data and all of the images that you see are cached at the edge all around the globe, so that people get fast access to this stuff, and it just kind of pops, right? And we're getting this nice fade-in effect. So the site looks really well and performs really well. And the interesting thing about if you build in this way, the more people are using it, sort of the better the experience is, because the data is the images and the web pages themselves are spread further around the globe, so that people get access to the data even faster. The really important thing to note is that when I am doing this, and we'll look at this in detail, when I am going from page to page, I am not hitting the database. So the content is in the database, but we're not hitting the database to display these pages. Let's take a look at the database here. This is it. We've got posts, we've got authors, we've got files, we've got some site settings here. And so the most interesting one that we're going to spend the most time on is our most interesting one I'm going to spend the most time on is the posts here. And that this data is coming from, or this data here is coming from that file. So what does it look? Well, let me look at the structure a little bit more, because there's a couple interesting things here. In our schema, we have posts and post versions. And the reason we do that is because you want to be able to be editing a site, editing content like a blog post, and not have it go live. And using these modern caching strategies, you can set up the cache rules so that at a certain point, the cache just will expire, or it will know that it's time to refresh the data from the database. So we don't really want to be editing the published version. We want a draft version to do that. So that's what our schema is showing here. We've got the selected version, which is the version that we'll be editing directly, and then your current and your draft version. And this is just a selector. You select the version that you want to edit, or you select the post version you want to edit, and that's what will be displayed. The other thing is files in a separate table, and you'll kind of see why that's important. It's not necessary, but it will certainly help you, especially if you get to a lot of scale. So let's take a look at how this content is being generated. So this is what it looks like here. Let's look at it here. Right, we're seeing that content, the images, the kind of rich text. This is just lorem ipsum, obviously. But the nice thing about this about what we've chosen here is we've chosen just to use Markdown. There are certainly other ways you could do this. You could do this with a full rich text editor, but Markdown has a lot of benefits for writing in particular, and it also just works in FileMaker. Like, it's not a special publishing format. And I suppose you could even use the style text that FileMaker puts out, but that might even be a little bit more challenging. But you can do really nice things. Like, let's say I wanted to make a link to Strawberry Jam here, and I want to link to a post about Strawberry Jam. And I'm just searching my posts file table here in a card window, and I can select the different posts, and then I can choose that, and it creates the link for me in Markdown. And I can do the same thing with an image. So let's put another image right here. Let's insert an image, and we'll just pick another strawberry one here, and we will just select that. And now we've got the Markdown link to that image in here. And so now I've made some changes to this file, but notice that, again, it's not the changes to the public version. I can sort of see that by just going here, and you can see that the title didn't change because this is the public version, And what I'm working on here is a draft, but it's okay. So now I want to look at this in the website and see what my changes did. I can click preview. And what preview is going to do is it's going to allow the website to fetch from the database for this. So I can see my changes. I can see my link. I can see the things that I've changed there in preview mode. And so this lets me write the text that I'm writing, write the document that I'm writing, and then I can preview it right in the live website. And you can see it knows it's in preview mode. And so I do that until I'm satisfied, and I can clear preview mode. And then when everything is ready, we don't need these here, I can go and publish this. And when I publish this, I'm going to let the website know, hey, I would like you to generate a new version of this file and of this page, and stash it all over the internet and all of these images as well. And so that is what's happening here. We've got really nice tight integration between my FileMaker data and my website. And as soon as I decide this content is ready to go live, I can publish it. And before, when I'm checking it, I can preview it, and I won't be affecting the live website. So I think that's a pretty good overview of what's happening here. Another thing just to say about the why I have files in a separate table is that it lets you do these nice little searches here. So I can search for images like we did a minute ago. Let's see. I think that's about all I want to cover here. Let's go back and take a look at the next section. Okay, so in the demo, we looked at using FileMaker to maintain, secure, and share the content. And that was integrated with the modern infrastructure platforms, which we're going to look at next. And just a note, this works really great for content-heavy sites. Not really great for things that need a lot of real-time data updates or data is changing a lot. That would be more in the traditional FileMaker sweet spot, not in this kind of environment. But for content sites, it's great. So this is what's happening behind the scenes there is that we've got a FileMaker server running on our cloud, and in between the users, which you can see as the blue users around the outside, and the FileMaker server, we've got a bunch of cloud services that are out there kind of mediating access to the FileMaker server. So these would be things like content delivery networks called CDNs. They cache images all over the world so that when a browser requests an image, it can get it locally from the closest data center to that browser. Data caches, same thing, but for data. Edge functions and serverless functions are actually for doing compute out there on the edge, so close to the user, so that you don't even have to come back to one server to run all of your computation. And then finally, these image optimizers, which can resize and re-optimize images on the fly, are also part of that to make those images work really well in browsers and make the pages load really fast. So you don't have to worry about doing this all yourself because deployment platforms have this stuff built in. They handle it all, really. If what you're deploying on doesn't handle this stuff by default, you may want to look for some new options. And so here's the ones that we see a lot, and the ones that we have some experience with. Vercel in particular is our favorite, but all of these other ones, Render, Netlify, FlyIO, Cloudflare, AWS Amplify, there's others. There's actually a lot of these. And they all are, what they're trying to do is make it easy for you to develop websites that take advantage of that kind of infrastructure that I just talked about. And the front-end frameworks, so these are JavaScript web front-end frameworks, are also highly optimized to do this. So they run in serverless functions, they run on the edge, they do all that kind of stuff. And they're often coupled with a favorite deployment platform, but doesn't mean they can't be deployed anywhere. So the example being Next, which Next is built by the same company that does it's built by Vercel. So they're very tightly coupled. So really what you have to learn is a front-end framework and a deployment and how to deploy, and you get all this stuff for free. And the FileMaker piece at this point, FileMaker is like any other database. And it actually doesn't matter. In a case like a content-heavy site that we're talking about, you're going to have the same issues with MySQL or Postgres that you're having, that you can have with FileMakers. You just don't want people to hit your FileMaker server or your database server if you can put all this stuff sort of out there in front to prevent that from happening. It's just going to be way faster. So our stack is Next.js running on Vercel. We use Chakra or Tailwind for UI. Upstash we use for data caching. It's a Redis serverless Redis flavor. And then of course our automatic cloud platform for running our FileMaker servers. So let's take a look at a demo. We're going to actually dive into the code here and see kind of how this works from inside of the Next.js site that is running Gem Club. Here's our website, and it's running in Next.js here locally. You can see that happening. I'm going to use this demo page, which I've set up here. And the way that works is you create a file in the pages folder called demo, and then that just becomes a route here, demo. And so this is our demo page. So starting at the top, we've got a FileMaker client here. This is the same one that Eric's going to be demoing in another session. I encourage you to check that out. It's really awesome. It's in TypeScript, so we get a lot of really awesome type ahead and type safety. Here we're doing a fetch to get the data from the Strawberry Fields post and the public version of that. And because of TypeScript, I see all the field names that are on the layout there, which is really nice. And then I'm getting the post data and spreading it out into a props object that gets returned to the demo page. And this is what actually renders on the screen. So you're seeing the heading, which is Strawberry Fields, the author name, which is just in a text tag. This is React JSX stuff here. And this is just a regular old image tag. So those are the three things that we're seeing. If I wanted to add another one here, I could do props dot, let's do modification timestamp. And we say that, there it is, shows up right there. So this is our page and it is live. So now notice every time I hit this, we're getting this hitting the database. And the reason that's happening is because here in our server-side function, it's running that query and it's hitting the database to get the data and pass it on to the post. Because it's running inside of GetServerSideProps, this is a function that Next provides that you implement. It will run every time on the server. So this would be simulating what a normal web page might do that was fetching data from FileMaker if it didn't have any caching involved. It would constantly be, every time the page was loaded, it would be hitting the FileMaker server. In Next terms, I can start to solve this in a number of ways. One is I can switch this to get static props. And now, if I do a local dev build of this, local prod build, right? So I'm going to make a local production version. What's going to happen is this page is going to be built at build time. So now it's here and it's loading fine, and we won't see any hitting the database. So just by changing the get server-side props to static props, I've now pushed this content out to Vercel's edge network, and it's loading, or it would be if I wasn't local production mode here. But if I pushed it to Vercel, it would be all over the world and be able to be accessed again without hitting the database. So that's pretty nice. Now, what if another nice little fine tuning you can do is, let's say you want to change the database, but you don't necessarily want to trigger an update right away. You can do another thing, which is you can have this page decide that its data is stale and that it needs to what's called revalidate. And what we do is we can set that for 10 seconds. And now I'm going to reboot that server to get that code live. Now what's going to happen is the page will be cached for up to 10 seconds. And the next person to hit it will trigger a refetch. So we're not going to see anything. I'm hitting the refresh button here. We're not seeing anything. And after about 10 seconds, there it goes, hitting the database. And now I'm hitting it again, hitting it again, hitting it again. Nothing's happening. So with just that simple thing, I've gotten to a point where it doesn't matter how many people are hitting this website, hitting this page. It could be 1 million people hitting this page. The database is only going to get a hit every 10 seconds. So you could increase this. You could go 60 seconds. You could go an hour. You could go a day. And now you could have 1 million people hitting this page, but it's never going to hit it's only going to hit the database once every, it's only hit the database once every day. That's it. So that's all you have to do to make that work. Now there's one more change I want to do here. One more thing I want to show. Let's see. Let's get rid of this. We can do, I want to point out this here. If we inspect this, we see it's pretty large, 623 KB. And that's pretty big. It's unoptimized. And I can make it optimized. Let's boot this up in dev mode here. So it's a little faster. I can optimize this by using a next image tag provided by Next and simply replacing my image tag with that. And now when I refresh and I inspect that image, you see it's much different. First of all, there's a lot of different stuff. And so it's giving us a whole bunch of different optimizations based on the device and the browser that's accessing it. So in this case, now it's down to 30 kilobytes. That's 20 times smaller just by switching the tag. I don't have to do anything else to do that. And another thing to note is this is actually going to be a WebP file. So if I drag this onto my desktop there and we just look at the file name there, it's WebP, which is one of the new formats that is better for optimizations for the web. And we didn't have to do anything except use Next Image. And Next Image knows that Chrome supports WebP, and it just automatically produces a highly optimized image for you for that browser. As you can see, it's still a great image. It's 20 times smaller though, which adds up to being much faster. And now it's cached all over the world again. One more technique that's pretty useful that is not specifically tied to something like Vercel or Netlify is just caching the data that you get back from your FileMaker request to the FileMaker server in Redis. So let me just walk through this code here real quick. This is, we use something called Upstats, which is a serverless version of Redis. It's pretty easy to set up. This is all of the code that I need to set that up. I'm just creating an object, a client that has a get, set, and delete property methods on them, functions on them. And they're just basically storing data in a cache and allowing it to expire after a certain period of time. And so it'll store it in Redis. Redis is a database that can live on the cloud, and it's just very, very fast. So it's a key value store, way faster than FileMaker, way cheaper to run, that kind of stuff. So if I have some data which isn't going to change often, and I don't want to use the stale while revalidate techniques or the publishing techniques we looked at earlier, Redis is another option. So here I have this function called getAllPosts, which fetches all of my data from my FileMaker posts, right? All of these guys. This data doesn't change often, but it changes a little bit. So I want to do a little bit different type of caching on it. So whenever this function is called, I check my cache by simply saying getAllPosts. And if I have a value, I just return that value. If I don't, then I go on and I do the find like we did before. And I just set that, cache and I give it an expiration of 5 minutes. So in this case, when I'm doing it this way, this getAllPost function will get called all the time, but this part, this FileMaker find, will only get called at least no more than once every 5 minutes. So Redis is another good option for doing things where you just want to cache just the results of your FileMaker database. Well, it's good for any kind of cache, but I like it in this case. All right, so there was a look at how to build FileMaker databases at scale. Let's cover some of the issues that we talked about as sort of a recap and touch on any others that are important. Public data only. So you don't want to cache data that is private to a user. So if somebody has to log in to see that data, you shouldn't put it in the cache. That's just a basic rule. And so it's really for this kind of stuff that you don't have to log into to see. Blog posts, content for a web page, documentation, things like that. Don't hit the database, as we talked about over and over again. Use these deployment platforms and the infrastructure they provide to keep the data out there in the cloud and to limit the number of requests that actually hit your database. And you can also use something like Redis or Upstash to cache individual queries that you're making to your database for the same purpose. Images. FileMaker Server has the ability now to turn off this session cookie to stream the images out of a container field. This can be useful under some circumstances, and I will include a link to how to do that in the notes that come along with everything here. Using a separate file table for your images and files is a good idea for a number of reasons. One of which is that you might actually want to at some point switch everything out to use an external storage system like S3. I'll link to a nice example on how to do that from Jason Wood on how you can set that up. Image optimization will let your website deliver the proper format at the proper size to whatever a browser or device is requesting those images. And then CDNs, of course, to get that stuff out there all around the world so it's closer to your users. Content. We talked about Markdown, and I'll be expanding on Markdown, adding some more features to that very simple editor that we showed today. You could also use the rich text editor add-on. That could be used as well. And I expect to see some more stuff happening here with more full page builders, kind of things that you can put inside of FileMaker. Recap. So FileMaker is really good at organizing, managing, and I would say even securing your data. And it fits really well with the modern infrastructure that we have available today. And it's not that hard to do. So if you can plant yourself firmly in this cloud-first way of thinking, you will be able to extend the investment you have in FileMaker. You'll be able to scale the reach of your applications. You'll get a nice modern look and feel, and your applications will be more resilient because they won't be hammering the database as hard as they're serving more users. So that's it. Thank you very much. Here is some contact information, and here is a link to where all the goodies are. Everything that you saw and more will be available at that link. Thanks, and enjoy the show.